There's a particular kind of loneliness that some people carry, and it's not the kind that comes from being far away from home. It's stranger than that, more disorienting. It's the feeling of standing in the place where you were born, surrounded by familiar streets and familiar faces, and yet feeling like you don't belong, like you're a visitor in your own life, like the country you grew up in has become foreign, or maybe you became foreign to it. And if you've ever felt this, then you know it's not just nostalgia or restlessness. It's something that speaks to the complex ways we build identity, belonging, and the quiet devastation that comes when the place that shaped you no longer feels like yours. See, people who feel homesick in their own country aren't just dissatisfied or ungrateful. Beneath the surface, there's often a profound disconnection, a sense that the culture, values, or pace of life around them doesn't match what lives inside them. And here's what most people don't understand. This isn't about hating where you're from. It's about the painful realization that you've outgrown it, or it's outgrown you, or perhaps you were never quite the right fit to begin with. You look around at people who seem perfectly content, perfectly at home, and you wonder what's wrong with you. Why can't you just belong the way everyone else seems to? For many people who experience this, there's a deep sense of cultural displacement, even though they've never left. Maybe you grew up in a conservative community, but your values evolved in liberal directions, or vice versa. Maybe you spent time abroad, even briefly, and came back changed, carrying experiences that created distance between you and everyone who stayed. Or maybe you simply woke up one day and realized that the life everyone around you is living, the goals they're pursuing, feel hollow to you, meaningless, like you're watching a play you're no longer interested in performing. This creates a strange psychological state. You're surrounded by the familiar, streets you've walked 1,000 times, landmarks you've known since childhood, people who speak your language, but none of it feels like home anymore. Home is supposed to be where you feel safe, understood, where you can be yourself without explanation, but instead you feel like you're constantly translating yourself, editing your thoughts, hiding parts of who you are because they don't fit the cultural script you're supposed to follow. And this constant self-editing is exhausting. It creates a split between your public self and your private self, between who you are and who you have to pretend to be to fit in. There's often a profound loneliness that comes with this. Because how do you explain to people that you feel homesick for a place you've never been? That you're lonely in a room full of people who've known you your whole life? People tell you to be grateful. They remind you of all the good things about where you live. They get defensive, as if your personal disconnection is a criticism of them. And so, you learn to keep it quiet, to smile and nod and pretend you belong, while inside, you're aching for something you can't even name. Many people who feel this way describe a sensation of being out of sync, like everyone around them is moving to a rhythm you can't hear or don't want to dance to. And this creates a constant, low-level friction, a sense that you're always swimming against the current, always feeling like the odd one out. Not because you're trying to be different, but because you genuinely are different, and there's nowhere in your own country where that difference feels welcomed or understood. Some experience this sensation early, while others experience this shift later, often after exposure to different cultures, ideas, or ways of living. Maybe you built friendships online with people from around the world and realized you have more in common with strangers thousands of miles away than with neighbors you've known your entire life. And when you came back or logged off, the contrast became unbearable. This realization creates a specific kind of grief. You're mourning something you never actually had but always hoped for, the feeling of truly belonging, of being surrounded by people who understand you without explanation. And this grief is complicated because it's invisible. There's no sympathy for someone who's homesick in their own home. People expect you to just adjust, to just be happy with what you have. But you can't force belonging. You can't manufacture the feeling of home through willpower alone. There's also often a layer of guilt that accompanies this feeling. Guilt for not being satisfied with what you have, or guilt for feeling disconnected from family and old friends who seem perfectly happy with lives that feel suffocating to you. This guilt makes everything worse because now you're not just lonely, you're lonely and ashamed of your loneliness. You're not just disconnected, you're judging yourself for being unable to connect. And this self-judgment creates another barrier between you and any possibility of finding peace where you are. People who feel homesick in their own country often develop a complicated relationship with identity. Who are you if not defined by where you're from? If you don't feel connected to your national identity, to your cultural heritage, to the place that's supposed to be foundational to who you are, then what does that make you? You exist in a strange liminal space, not quite belonging to where you are, but not belonging anywhere else either. You're culturally homeless, carrying a passport that gives you legal belonging, but not psychological belonging. And this ambiguity, this lack of clear identity, can feel destabilizing. Some cope by trying harder to fit in. They double down on patriotism, on cultural traditions, on convincing themselves and others that they do belong, that they are connected. But performance is exhausting, and eventually, the mask becomes too heavy to maintain. The disconnection doesn't disappear just because you're pretending it's not there. It just gets buried deeper, creating internal tension that manifests as restlessness, irritability, depression, a persistent sense that something essential is missing from your life. Others cope by planning escape. They research other countries, learn new languages, imagine lives in places they've never been but feel inexplicably drawn to. They scroll through images of cities or landscapes that feel more like home than the place they've lived their entire lives. They fantasize about starting over somewhere else, somewhere where they might finally fit, where the culture aligns with who they are rather than who they're expected to be. And these fantasies provide temporary relief, a sense of hope that maybe belonging is possible, just not here. But they also create a painful split between their current reality and their imagined future, making it even harder to be present in their actual lives. There's a particular pain in feeling disconnected from family and childhood friends because of this. These are people who've known you forever, who love you, who want the best for you, but they don't understand why you're so restless, why you can't just settle down and be happy like everyone else. Dome can take your disconnection personally, seeing it as rejection of them rather than incompatibility with the broader culture. And maybe you can't explain it in ways that don't hurt them. How do you tell your parents that the values they raised you with no longer fit? How do you tell old friends that you've outgrown the conversations you used to have? How do you maintain connections with people who feel increasingly like strangers, even though they're supposed to be your closest relationships? Many people in this situation describe feeling like they're always waiting for life to really start. And this waiting creates a kind of suspended animation where you're not fully invested in your current life because it doesn't feel permanent, doesn't feel real, doesn't feel like your actual life. You're just passing time until you can get to wherever home actually is. But this waiting prevents you from building anything meaningful where you are, which reinforces the disconnection, which makes the homesickness worse. But here's something important that people in this situation often don't realize. The homesickness you're feeling might not be about geography at all. Sometimes what feels like disconnection from your country is actually disconnection from yourself. You've spent so long adapting, performing, hiding parts of yourself to fit in, that you've lost touch with who you actually are underneath all the adaptation, and no place will feel like home until you figure out how to be at home in yourself, until you can integrate all the parts of yourself you've been fragmenting to survive culturally. This doesn't mean the disconnection isn't real or valid. It doesn't mean you should just accept cultural incompatibility and stop longing for something different. But it does mean that geographic relocation isn't always the solution, because sometimes people move to the country they've been fantasizing about and discover they brought the same disconnection with them, because the problem wasn't just location, it was identity, it was belonging, it was the fundamental question of how to be yourself in a world that seems to have very specific ideas about who you should be. For some people, the path forward involves finding pockets of belonging within their own country, seeking out subcultures, communities, or spaces where different ways of thinking and being are welcomed. Finding your people, even if they're scattered rather than geographically concentrated. Building chosen family from people who understand you, who share your values, who don't require you to translate yourself to be accepted. And these pockets of connection can make the broader disconnection more bearable, creating islands of home in a country that otherwise feels foreign. For others, the path involves actually leaving, finding places that align better with who they are, where they can finally stop performing and just exist. And there's courage in that choice, in acknowledging that sometimes the place that shaped you isn't the place that fits you. And that's okay, that you don't owe it to your country or your family or anyone else to stay somewhere that makes you feel like a stranger to yourself. That seeking belonging is a valid and worthy pursuit, even if it means leaving behind everything familiar. But whatever path you choose, whether you stay or leave, whether you find belonging or learn to live with disconnection, the most important thing is recognizing that your feelings are valid. You're not broken for feeling homesick in your own country. You're not ungrateful or defective or wrong. You're simply someone whose internal world doesn't match your external environment, and that mismatch creates real psychological pain. It's not something you can just think your way out of or force yourself to stop feeling. It's a legitimate experience of displacement, of cultural incompatibility, of being in the wrong place, even though it's technically the right place. And maybe the deepest truth about feeling homesick in your own country is this: home isn't just a location, it's a feeling. It's where you can be fully yourself without translation, where your values are reflected rather than challenged, where you're understood without explanation. And sometimes that place is exactly where you were born, but sometimes it's not. And learning to honor your truth, whatever that truth is, even when it means acknowledging that you don't belong where you're supposed to belong, is an act of profound courage, because it's easier to pretend, to perform, to stay small and quiet and adapted. But it's braver to admit that you're homesick for a place you've never been, and to let yourself search for where home actually is, even if that search takes you far from where you started. You deserve to feel at home somewhere, even if that somewhere isn't where everyone expected it to be.